Naturally, there's no better way to start your show than to turn everything on and find that the camera doesn't work, so you have to restart the computer. So that's what happened. Why I'm just a tiny bit late, and I have a wonderful guest standing by who'll be joining us in just a couple of minutes. Welcome. You're having a nooner with Dave LaMont, and I am, Dave. All the ways to find me on the other social medias are right there. We start with a big story in local baseball news. Kim Ng is the new manager of the Miami Marlins, the new general manager. They have a manager of the year, in fact, in Don Mattingly. And Kim becomes the first woman to be a general manager at the major league level and very experienced in the game. This isn't just some move for social justice. This is a move that makes baseball sense, as well as becomes an important moment in the history of Major League Baseball by promoting Kim into this position. Been around the game a long time. So this is what's really nice about it. If you want to try to complain, you're going to get shut down pretty quickly on this, because clearly qualified to be in this kind of position. So with the Marlins team that had a pretty good season in the shortened year, there's been so much negativity around this franchise for so long that getting in and having a pretty good year, now this opportunity here, a lot of people like what the Marlins' future looks like. So this was announced just about a half an hour ago, and it looks like a great move. We'll see if it works out. It's interesting down here because you have the Dolphins, who appear to be a playoff team after years of being literally irrelevant in the NFL. The Inter Miami CF made the playoffs. Now, look, they made the playoffs with a 7-win, 13-loss, and 3-draw record, but the fact is they're in. You had the Heat doing what they did. The only team that didn't hold up its end of the bargain this year was the Florida Panthers, who had a very disappointing season, as it turned out. Yeah, they made the playoffs, but not really, and they were swept away, so they need some work to catch up. But all of a sudden, this area has become competent. Miami Hurricanes are favored to beat Virginia Tech in yet another game that they could just as easily lose, because that's been their way they've been living life for the past few years. But so far, they've avoided every one of those speed traps. And here's a good example of another one coming up. And I've talked about it already. They're winning the games they're supposed to win, which they weren't doing in the past. Florida Gators and Arkansas, one of the few surviving games on the SEC calendar this weekend. As I mentioned, I've already awarded the Gators the SEC East title. I don't see any reason why they can't win it. And at least they're playing, because this has been a bad weekend for COVID postponements. And there's even a little bit of muttering. And this just shows you the conflict that this virus has caused in college sports. Commissioner of the Big 12, Bob Bowlesby, sort of admits, hey, maybe we need to look at the playoff dates and national championship date as not set in concrete. Maybe we need to be flexible with that, depending on how the rest of the season goes out and how many more postponements and all of this other stuff. To me, a very common sense idea, except, what's that expression? He said the quiet part out loud. So it didn't take long for the rest of the Big 12 to go, hey, Bob, no, come on, buddy. We're okay. We're going to be just fine. You know, what is that? This thing? So college football's got problems. We're approaching the college basketball season with the Ivy League already just quitting. There's no other way to describe it. And so it's going to be a fascinating – I mean, there's so many mixed messages in that sport as far as what they're going to do. So we've had 58 college football games postponed or canceled so far this season. The NFL is somehow avoiding major disaster. And we just wait and see. Meantime, as we all know, the numbers are getting worse. I mentioned in the run-up to this that I wanted to talk today about Wichita State college basketball and their situation regarding head coach Gregg Marshall. It is dire, at least if you go by what's been reported. And when I thought of the situation and thought of Wichita State and thought of Gregg Marshall, there's one person more than anybody I know in the country who covers college basketball, other than people in Wichita, who can give us a really balanced objective on this. Is a man who knows this program in and out, also is a friend and a hell of a guy. Would you please welcome from ESPN, Mark Adams. How are you, buddy?
Dave, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. And I mention that because I know, I mean, not only if I work with you, but I've also seen you many a time. And there was a stretch there that I think you were at more games than Gregg Marshall. Or so it seemed. So let's go back to the beginning of all this when these allegations about verbal and even physical abuse came out. What was your reaction?
Well, my first reaction was one of wait and see, and let's make sure that due process plays out. Because as you know, Dave, there's such a rush to judgment in every situation. And having been, in full disclosure, a longtime friend with Gregg Marshall, he's a guy that has meant a lot to my son, Robbie, and has mentored him. He called my father before he died. In fact, in the swirl of this tornadic controversy, a couple of days ago, he called my mother on her 90th birthday. So
Wow.
Full disclosure, I want to make sure that you understand the entire context. But I also want to say, Dave, that as you know, I'm a former coach, and we've sat side by side together. And you know that I've got literally hundreds of friends that are coaches. But when it comes down to broadcasting a game or talking about an issue like this, you know me well enough to know this is straight down the middle. I can separate the two, because in coaching, I wanted to kick all my friends' butts. That's the way it was. So when I first thought about it, I thought, first of all, let's let the due process play out. And that process, in effect, has played out now. And there are reports, I don't know how accurate they are, but certainly reports that there will be a separation between Gregg and Wichita State at some point. My gut tells me that that's probably true, based upon what I know and the discussions that I've had with various people around the community there. But my first thought was that if I were coaching today, and I go back, 20 some odd years when I was coaching, there were behaviors that were common. For example, I plead guilty, Dave. Okay. I've used inappropriate language in practices, and I don't now with my fourth grade team, but I certainly did then when I was coaching. Did I ever punch a player? No. Did I ever use a racial phrase or anything? No, I didn't do that. But you know what? I grabbed a player once. I can tell you exactly where it was at LSU, and it was Pavel Petrov, a kid that I love. He called me his American father. He was from the Soviet Union, of course, now Russia. And he cheap shot at a guy, and I grabbed him by the shirt and pushed him off the floor, and then told him to go run his tail, in the arena. And I regret it today that I made physical contact. But the fact of the matter is, Dave, I did it. And so I think now, Dave, it's about the solutions moving forward, and we can get into that. But I will tell you this, that if I was accused and it was proven that I hit a player, that I grabbed an assistant coach around the throat, if that's true, that I used, racial language that was inappropriate, then I would expect to lose my job. And frankly, I don't know that I'd be coaching on the collegiate level again, especially if I wasn't willing to deal with the problem, and admit it, be sorrowful for it, get counseling for it, all those kinds of things that I think have to be weighed. But we paint with such a broad brush for people that make mistakes. And for me, it's not only Gregg Marshall, the coach, and the mistakes that he allegedly made, and certainly appear that he made some of those mistakes in some way, shape, or form. But also there's the other side, the personal side of it, where he's treated me and my family extremely well. And I never saw any of that type of behavior in all the years I covered Wichita State.
Right. And people should know something also. We get an inside look at these programs, although sometimes it is brief. It might just be for an hour, hour and a half, or maybe a day before if you are able to attend a practice. So we do see language. We hear language. We do see a coach maybe grab a player, but maybe just to move him, say, look, no, and pull him by the shirt. No, you need to stand here. Nothing violent, nothing physical, but it's instructive. So, and coaches are natural in front of us. So they are not afraid, especially with you there, because they know your background, that they're not afraid to cut loose every once in a while and rip into a kid.
Yeah.
But we understand what's going on here. And I think if the general public knew a little bit more about that it does happen sometimes, that not racist or inappropriate language, but language that you wouldn't use on television, for example.
Right.
It does happen. I've sat through some Frank Martin practices at South Carolina. We know he's very expressive. On the other hand, he has incredible loyalty from his players. He inspires that. So I think if I were a South Carolina player and Frank was ignoring me, I'd be very worried. I'd almost prefer that he gave me a hard time about something. So we should let folks know that this kind of thing does happen to a lesser degree than what is alleged from Gregg. And we saw him this year, and he was frustrated. He was we had a long talk with him at a walkthrough. I think it was Orlando. And he was having a tough year. And, he expressed his dismay about a few things and it was all done with the knowledge that we were going to keep that to ourselves, which we did. He's lost, was it Wichita State program's lost, was it 10 players, Mark, over the last 2 years to transfers? Do you see a correlation there?
Well, certainly you've got to look at your own culture and you've got to look at yourself in the mirror when you lose 6 players that go out the door at the end of this past season. And Dave, you're absolutely right. Greg did share with us off the record at that time that he was frustrated with the team and gave us some specific reasons as to why. And some of those reasons certainly played out as we saw as players left. And the only guy that left, I think, without some type of a grudge was Asbjorn Midgard. And he ended up playing for Bryce Drew. He's going to go on Bryce Drew at Grand Canyon's, one of our colleagues at ESPN, now back in the coaching game. And, so you have to look at yourself in the mirror, Dave. And look, I don't want to sound Pollyannish about this, but I look at this as a former coach and as a business professional and as a broadcaster where you and we're judged by what we say and how we say it. And I really think that moving forward, coaches need to look internally, and this is across the profession at every level, where the negative bullying types of behaviors and also the verbiage that goes on in coaching right now. And again, I plead guilty to some of that, but I think we need to really look at ourselves in the mirror as coaches and say, is this the right way to go about this thing? I mean, if I use the same language on the floor that I use today in my business life, I'd be fired from every job I ever had. And so why isn't there a standard of ethics that coaches must adhere to create a professional environment? Because ultimately, what's a coach's job? Some say to win. In fact, I did a survey of coaches and asked them, was your top priority to win, to establish lifelong relationships, or other? And over 50% said establish lifelong relationships for successful, types of careers and that type of thing. But over 30% said win. Well, Dave, I think we got to look at that and say, what are we really in coaching for? We are there to prepare student athletes. And you've got a son, Drew, right now at Wyoming. And you had Drake before played college basketball in the MAC. And, you as a father, you wanted your son to play for a coach that was going to prepare them for future success.
Right.
I'm sure that you weren't a soft father, that you wanted your sons to be challenged. But you know what? I think in today's environment, we need to be a little bit more sensitive and come to an agreement that coaching is about creating successful, sustainable programs with successful, sustainable people through an example of how you do that in a business setting. And I really think that the coaching profession right now is missing the boat by not looking at what happened at Texas State, what happened now at Wichita State, what happened at Penn State. And all of that was because of inappropriate behavior. And that's just 3. Who hasn't spoken over the last 25 years? Because we're literally going back that far in some cases to dig up stuff. And I really think the coaches need to take control of their own profession, become more professional in how they deal with their players to prepare them ultimately to deal with a boss that won't use that language, that won't use the negativity at times that we see in practice. And again, I'm not against it. I'm not judging because I was on the floor and did it. But now looking back, Dave, if I were coaching today, just like I'm coaching 4th grade basketball, I'm demanding still, I'm direct still, but it's always very professional and typically 99.9% positive, although the kids will remember the 0.1% that maybe I was a little bit negative. But I really think we got to change in the coaching profession now. It's appropriate.
Well, I do some part-time broadcast teaching just down the road at a high school, and I always tell the students who don't know me, I said, look, I'm pretty fussy. I've been doing this my whole life.
Yeah.
So I will criticize you, but I'm going to teach you. I'm not going to be personal about my criticism. So that's the way you have to look at it. And that's what I try to tell them. If I pick apart the video you just turned in, I'm not picking you apart. I'm picking apart your work, and this hopefully will make you better. And that is ideally what a coach will do. And you mentioned the winning part. is there any surprise given the way the media covers, the way the fans look at it? They don't want to hear that you had a great graduation rate. They want to know if they're going to the NCAA tournament. They want to know if their guys are going to win. They want to know if they can wear their T-shirts around town and feel proud about their basketball team, not whether or not 12 of your guys graduated out of 12. Duke can brag about that. Duke also has banners. They can brag, hey, we graduate our guys. Yeah, you also win national championships. So I'm not surprised to hear you say that about your survey. I think there are guys like you who treasure the relationship part. And there's a lot of coaches who do that. I think my son's former coach at Western Michigan, Steve Hawkins,
great guy,
is a guy like that. Yeah. And I'll tell you another guy who I just adore and had as much to do with my son going to Western Michigan and really sold me is he was lucky enough to have Larry Farmer as the big man coach there. Yeah. As good a guy as I've ever met in sports. And I mean, there are people like that who are just solid people that you can turn your kid over and go to bed at night and not worry and realize. And now my son is a graduate assistant at Texas Tech. He's taken that education and made something out of it and has decided that he wants to be another Mark Adams and another guy like that. He wants to coach. And I think he'll be good at it. And I think he understands from the player's perspective, and he's gone through the more modern coaching. Not that Hawk was soft by any means, but not abusive. And I think that's the trick that we're getting, because we were also around in the days when the coach was the absolute authority figure. Right. You never questioned a word that person said, and you just did it or you left. And that has changed.
It certainly has, Dave. And you're familiar with the book that Jeff Van Fleet and I wrote on Coach Geek, not to self-promote here, but I was
going to do it anyway, so you might as well.
Well, one of the things that we've done, Dave, since the last time you and I visited was we surveyed literally dozens of coaches. We interviewed them. We've been researching on what's really important to a coach, and we gave them kind of a menu of things that might be important to them. And 94% of the coaches agreed that one of their top priorities was to build a successful, sustainable program. 94% of them agreed on that statement. That was their goal for their program. And so we started thinking in terms of, well, how could we help them? What types of things might we bring from our business perspective and building technology platform that maybe we could help them? And so then we surveyed a bunch of coaches and we surveyed players. And one of the interesting player surveys was this one, Dave, where we asked student athletes from high school and college, how often do you meet with your head coach one-on-one? The first response was either like once a day, once a week, once a month, or never. Over 50% of student athletes said never.
Wow.
Think about that. And our job is to build successful, sustainable programs and retain our players and recruit players and build it into a family. But yet 52% of respondents said never. So we looked at that as the coach and the geek, and we said, maybe we can help. And we've actually started work now on an electronic platform, if you will, an app, if you will, that helps coaches and players to connect and holds the coach and the player accountable for real communication. In a world, Dave, where, and on the right side of this, on the right side of history, we need to work on diversity. We need to work on inclusion. We need to work on better communication. We need to learn to listen and understand other people's viewpoints. What the coach and the geek, Jeff Van Fleet, and I decided to do was, can we build a technology that helps bring people together on a regular basis, both on the floor, as far as hustle stats, effort types of stats, and track those and turn that into a self-accountability type of exercise within the team, as well as off the floor, where I'm not just that coach. I'm not your coach today, Dave. I'm your friend. And here's where I'm challenged in my life. And here's 3 or 4 things that I'm doing, like telling my wife I love her twice a day to make sure she understands how much I love her, that I spend 1 hour a week alone with my son, Robbie, that I get on my knees and pray on a regular basis, throughout the week. And I exercise for my own well-being. That doesn't take talent to do those things. It takes concentration and effort. And I would go every Monday during my head coaching career was my player day. And the players would come in and they would share their own personal focus stats, if you will, of going to class every day, interacting with the professor by asking a question during the class, and they'd mark it down as they go. And that would be the exchange that we would have. My life, their life, and we would share how we were doing together. One quick story. I would ask my players to make sure, to hold me accountable for cussing in practice. I was really trying to work on to get better at not cussing in practice. Again, I plead guilty. And so they did. And then when I would lose it and I would say something stupid, I'd owe them 10 push-ups. I'd do it right there in practice. If something slipped out, say, Coach, give us 10. I go down and give us 10. That's the accountability. That's the type of culture that we want to build. And that's more appropriate today. And when we talk about diversity, inclusion, communication, listening skills, it's more appropriate today than any other time, either as athletes or as just citizens of this great country.
Well, I can tell you from the perspective of my sons that a communicative coaching staff is important. They want that especially my youngest, but they really value that. They just don't want to feel like they're there to play basketball.
Yeah.
They do want to feel a part of the university. They do want to feel a part of something bigger than just the arena and the weight room and the training room. And a good coach will bring that out. And accountability, how many times when we talk to coaches, do we always hear them either praise or complain about accountability? But how many times do we ever hear the coaches talk about it about themselves? And it's not quite as often. And I'm glad you said that, because if you expect it from others, you got to show some of that yourself. That goes for anything.
Yeah, it really does. My fourth grade team the other night, this was fascinating. We were running shell drill, and we had just gotten done on offense helping the fourth graders to catch and square. That's rule number one offensively, catch and square, you know. And so we have like 4 assistant coaches out there. I'm one of them, actually. There's a head coach, but I run all the defensive stuff. And so I had all the coaches set up in shell drill on the offensive side, and the players had to either be in stop side position, what some people call help side or pressure the ball. Well, the coaches were catching the ball. And one of our fourth graders, little Henry, after about 5 minutes in the drill, he raised his hands. What's up, Henry? He goes, Coach, why aren't the coaches catching and squaring up? How great is that? You know, how great is that a fourth grader, because he feels comfortable enough, because of the relationships that we build, is challenging the coaches for the same accountability that we're holding them accountable for. Dave, the stuff we're doing with our Focus app, I think is groundbreaking as far as effective coaching goes. And I'm so excited about it because, you know me, and you as well, we want to be part of the solution. There's a problem out there. Mm-hmm. We need to face it. And I think college basketball is a place where we can really make a difference along with other sports around the country at the high school and the collegiate level.
Well, let's take it back to the Wichita situation before I let you go. Gregg Marshall has not been at practice this week. They're calling it personal reasons. What's the next step for that program? If he does indeed part ways, where do they go? Do they just stay within, or do you think they would try to make a big hire from the outside?
Well, first of all, I'm sure attorneys are hammering out dotting of I's and crossing of T's right now. That's why we probably haven't heard how that separation is going to take place, whether it be a firing for cause or a graceful step away by resigning. And then as far as the hiring situation goes, there's a lot of rumors out there. The hottest rumor is around Thad Matta, of course, former head coach at Butler, here and at Ohio State. He's available, right now. Now, whether or not a Thad would want to walk into a situation like that, that would certainly be difficult because we're literally now days away from opening the season. I would think that they would stay within with one of the assistant coaches. Coach Brown would probably be the most likely. But, Darren Boatwright certainly has, the athletic director of Wichita State, certainly has a deep Rolodex. There's no Rolodexes anymore, but he's got a deep contact list on Salesforce or someplace that he can go to. But it's going to be really interesting. Another guy that's out there is John Beilein. He's also available right now. So they're good games. And Wichita State, they're paying Gregg $3.5 million. And if it goes down the path that's being reported right now, if I was the AD, I would probably just cut my losses, get through this season, and then make a hire after that. That's probably what I would do.
Well, I'm just thinking, you mentioned the 3.5, the budgetary issues that colleges are going through right now because of lost revenue, the pandemic and all of that. Not that Wichita State is a football school, but that basketball is critical to them. I would think just maybe there's a financial thing that might drive that decision too, where I'd love to have John Beilein. He's known as a teacher and really a guy who should have never left college basketball, but that's for another day. He might be a guy I bring in, and he might be the guy who smooths out the pavement a little bit and makes life better at Wichita, and then he can step away after a few years. But I got to think the money's going to play a part of it in this case. If you're an AD right now at college, you got to wake up with a headache every day worrying about what might I have to cut. Look at the Ivy League, wiping out winter sports, wiping out basketball completely, and all of the changes that are being made now in different conferences with new scheduling. I went to the Wyoming website, and the only games up there now are the non-conference games because the Mountain West is going to redo their in-conference regular season plan. So that's just an opinion with zero facts based on it. And we also should be fair to Gregg. He has denied the assault stories flat out. So I didn't mention that earlier, but we have to be honest and fair to Gregg Marshall that he has said, I didn't do this, I'm denying it, and we have every right to report that end of it. You kind of touched on something a little bit. If Gregg does leave Wichita State, what's the best path for him, do you think? Get away from the game, take a short break, try to get back? I mean, what does he do?
Well, I think with the pandemic situation, it compounds it even more, because typically what you can do is you can go ahead and take a year sabbatical. You can visit practices. You might be able to get into broadcasting, all those kinds of things. I mean, look at Bruce Pearl after what he went through,
right?
The NCAA investigation, and then went to ESPN, but was able to bounce back and go to Auburn. You look at my friend Kelvin Sampson, who was sent to a 5-year exile for phone calls, of all things. That rule doesn't even exist anymore, by the way. But he got a 5-year show cause for that, and went to the NBA, NBA for a while, and had a successful run as an assistant coach with the Timberwolves and with the Houston Rockets. And now look at the success that he's having, and has built a wonderful culture at Houston and a tremendous program with a lot of good young men that you and I got to see up close and personal, and the job that he's done. So there is a path back. I think that, but then you look at Mike Rice, for example, former head coach at Rutgers, who has not had a path back because of some similar types of things, of quote unquote abusive behavior that was shown on video and that type of thing. And he's never made it back to the college coaching scene. So, for me,
the video's deadly.
Yeah. For me, Dave, it's really about, Gregg's going to be my friend before, now, and after. And if I can help him in some ways, navigate those waters, not that he needs my help, but, I'm a pretty loyal guy. And while I don't approve of the alleged behavior, and like I said, if I perform those types of activities, I would expect to lose my job. I would expect all the negativity that comes along with that. But by the same token, I would hope there'd be a few friends that would look at the broader picture of what I've done with my life and maybe be loyal enough to hang with me during the difficult times. And I've lived my life that way when some of my friends make mistakes, and I would hope they do the same for me. And frankly, a lot of them have. Well,
that's a very good point. In the coaching ranks, and better than I do how those relationships stay forever, and these people will help. But I'm sure he will get plenty of positive reinforcement, even if this stuff turns out to be true, or if he leaves as a result of the allegations. But it's an unfortunate situation. I know it's awkward for you, but I knew you also would be the absolute perfect person to talk to about this, that I could only add about 1/100th of what you know about the program and about Gregg and everything else. Take a second again, because I have a copy of A Coach and the Geek, but where can people find this? I do recommend it because what Mark is able to do, and you can tell that he's an excellent communicator on and off the air, but he and his partner have done a wonderful job in really making it an easy but not insultingly easy way of getting their point across. So where can people find your book?
Amazon.com, The Coach and the Geek by Mark Adams and Jeff Van Fleet. It's $17.95 for the hard copy. I think it's like $9 for the electronic version of it. And, Dave, we've gotten tremendous response. Hundreds and hundreds of coaches have read the book to really positive reviews, which has launched our focus on the Focus platform, if you will, to help coaches to better connect, communicate, and ultimately be lifelong members of the mentorship club toward their players and all their coaches. So it's been a really great run, and you and I introduced it on ESPN on a broadcast together, and I appreciate your friendship. We worked together this past season. We had a blast together, and Dave, I just wish you nothing but the best.
Thank you. You too. And I have to tell you, and I'll go on the record, I've said it to you already, but last year was the most enjoyable college basketball season I ever had as a broadcaster, and you were so much responsible for that. It's not even funny. I wish people knew how much I valued your insight and your friendship, and still do. So thank you, Mark, for the time. I hope to get a chance to talk to you during the season, and maybe we can start looking at things from a wins and losses and X's and O's perspective. I would love to do that again sometime. So keep a day open for me one day.
You betcha. Thanks, Dave, and best
Thank you, Mark.
Family, especially as we approach Thanksgiving and Christmas.
You as well. Thank you. Mark Adams from ESPN joining me, and that's going to take it for our Nooner for Friday. Thank you all very much for watching. You'll find this on YouTube later, and, of course, it's always available on Facebook Live. For Mark and for everybody, thanks. Have a safe weekend. Enjoy your Masters. Dustin Johnson was doing very well last I looked, and we'll talk again. Take care. Bye-bye.